Hello, I'm John, and today I'm going to do a 2-week reading wrap-up. I read 6 books, which seems a little light to me, really, but I haven't been very well lately. I've been kind of sick, and it's gone up and down, up and down. I've been all right for a couple of days, and then gone back downhill, and some days I'm okay in the morning, and then at night I'm not, and then in the morning I'm okay, and at night I'm not, so it's been kind of frustrating. And when I feel bad, I mostly just reach for entertainment. And that's what I did these last couple of weeks, was just try to read some entertaining books. And the first book I read was Elmore Leonard's Last Stand at Saber River. This was okay. It was kind of a ridiculous plot. There is a Confederate soldier who is ridden with Nathan Bedford Forrest, and he's been wounded, and now he's gone all the way home to New Mexico. He left New Mexico to go all the way to Tennessee to join the war. And I thought maybe Leonard would try to make a statement about that one way or the other. I wasn't sure, but I think he just slapped it on there because he thought it was cool. So it was kind of unnecessary, and it's kind of hard to look at a main character who, rode with Nathan Bedford Forrest and was present at Fort Pillow, at the Fort Pillow massacre, and to see him as a hero. But Elmore Leonard never mentions slavery. He never mentions racism. He never mentions the Fort Pillow massacre. I think Elmore Leonard just thought that, well, we'll make him a Confederate soldier going home, and then I'll slap on this Nathan Bedford Forrest just because it's cool. And that's kind of odd. I didn't really care for that. I thought that was unnecessary, and it kind of, I don't know, it took my, it pretty much dried up my sympathy for Paul Cable immediately. So he goes home, and there are some Yankee sympathizers who have taken over his house, and they're grazing horses on his land, and instead of having some common sense and thinking to himself, there's a war going on, I'm a Confederate soldier, they have the law completely on their side, maybe I should just, I don't know, take off for a while and wait till the heat dies down or whatever. But he just walks into his house and kicks them out. They go to their bosses, who are supplying all these horses for the Union. And it just, I don't know, it just struck me as completely unrealistic, because all they'd have done is ride in there and arrest him and probably hang him. So the whole book just, I don't know, I really didn't like this one. I kind of wanted to DNF it, but I wanted to see where it went. I wanted to see what Leonard did with it, and on the whole, I was just kind of, it was just disappointing. It wasn't very good. And yeah, the next book I read was The Demonologist by Michael Laimo, and this was okay. It's a horror novel, clearly. It's one of these leisure horror books. I like to read these. I mean, I know they're going to be ridiculous, and this one was ridiculous, but they're usually pretty fun, pretty entertaining. This one was okay. It's about a middle-aged guy. He's suddenly become a rock star, and so his whole life has changed. He's making money. He's kind of famous at this point, and he's just finished a world tour. He's come home to Los Angeles, and he starts having these visions, these horrific visions and things like that. And it turns out that he's possessed by Satan. But that's not the main plot. The main plot is that in the 60s or 70s, in one of the Middle Eastern wars, there was this young boy, and his whole family is killed, and he's fleeing from these people. I don't remember who. And he hides in this hole in the ground, and it's a tomb where the demonologist had been buried. And apparently the demonologist lived like 2,000 years ago, and he was trying to bring all these demons into other people and then consume them so that he could have the power of all these demons. And if he could get, I think, 12 demons and Satan, he could be the most powerful person on earth or whatever. It was okay. I mean, it's pretty standard stuff in here as far as that goes. There's a cult in Los Angeles, and the boy possessed by the demonologist kind of becomes this inhuman monster, and it was all right. It wasn't my favorite book, but it was entertaining. I won't spoil the ending, but I think that if the ending had been different, I'd have liked this book better. It felt to me like the ending reminded me of kind of a B movie ending, and it just kind of, for me at least, it just kind of ruined the rest of the book. So, yeah, I didn't like the ending, but I mean the rest of it was okay. It had some very creative images of hell. I'll give it that. The next book I read was The Year's Best Horror Stories 20, edited by Karl Edward Wagner. There are, I think, 22 stories in this, and I think they were all pretty good. They were all pretty good. There were a few that I liked better than the others, but Karl Edward Wagner was apparently a pretty good editor, and he picked good stories. So the one I liked the best was called Maquis. It's the first story by Alan Brennert, and it's about an American soldier who's been killed in Vietnam, and he becomes a wandering spirit. That they have been in Vietnam so long, but they've taken the beliefs of the Vietnamese people, and they're now ingrained in the American soldiers, so they're subjected to the ideas of the afterlife. And it was really interesting. He's trying to find his body, and along the way he becomes kind of an evil spirit purely by accident. He means to do well, and it was really interesting. I thought it was really good. It was a really good way, I think, to start this one off. And another story I really liked was called Better Ways in a Wet Alley by Barb Hendy. And I've got a feeling that one's going to stick with me for a while. It starts off, there's this, I think, 15-year-old prostitute, and she's in an alley living in she's spending the night in a box in this rainstorm, and she doesn't have anywhere to go. So she remembers her friend has a hotel room. He's rented a hotel room or a motel room, and she goes to find him and stay with him. And he's 16, and he's also working the streets. And it was just really interesting how, there wasn't horror in the traditional sense of horror. There are no monsters, but it's just this horrible life these kids are living. And the boy, he's starting to have these desires to break free of this life, to get a job, to get a house, to live a normal life. And he killed somebody and stole his money to rent this motel room. And he's about to run out of money. They're about to be kicked out of the room. So he decides to go kill another guy and steal his money. And in the process, he gets killed. And it was just this whole, laying out this cycle of violence and poverty. And it was really well written, though. I really enjoyed it as much as that kind of thing can be enjoyed. I think that was really the scariest story in this whole book, because it was very realistic, and stuff like that happens, and I think that's pretty scary. Scarier than monsters, scarier than, anything supernatural. So I got a feeling that one will stick with me for a while. The next book I read was Mirror Shades, a Cyberpunk anthology edited by Bruce Sterling. I didn't really like this book very much. I don't really like Cyberpunk very much. I tend to think of it as mostly pastiche of William Gibson's Neuromancer. There's a lot of leather jackets and mirror shades and techno-savvy people who have hookups in their necks and things so they can port directly into computers, and a lot of synthetic drugs, and the the writers of the 80s saw the 90s and the 2000s as being very dystopian corporatocracies, and uh, it just doesn't work for me. I mean, it's very interesting. A lot of them are very interesting. The the image of the future, I think, is always very interesting. But it's just the kind of style of the cyberpunk genre, subgenre that I don't like. It's everything is very, it's very tied into mass media and fads, and I don't know. It just doesn't really work for me. Everyone tends to be really shallow, and uh, there were some stories in this that weren't very cyberpunk at all. I don't really see how they were included in this. Some of them didn't even seem to be science fiction stories. So I just didn't really care for this one very much. And so this book goes for quite a lot of money on eBay, 80, $90. And I don't really understand why. It's got to be because of this cover. The cover is pretty nice, but I paid $2.75 for this, and I feel like that was enough. So I don't think I certainly wouldn't want to pay $10 for this, let alone 80. So yeah. So the next book I read was House of Blood by Bryan Smith. This was okay. This is another leisure horror book. Back about 3 months ago, before I started my channel, I found a whole row of these at a Goodwill, and I just bought all of them. I remember seeing these all over the place when I was young at supermarkets and bookstores and places like that. So I'm kind of fond of them. I don't know. These covers just take me back. This one was all over the place. There are these four friends, or was it four or five? Five. There are five friends, and they're coming back home from a vacation to Key West. They're driving through Tennessee, and the main character is named Dream Weaver, and she's absolutely beautiful beyond belief. And she has just found her boyfriend in the arms of a man. And so they've all piled into this car and left her boyfriend behind. And they are driving through Chattanooga, and they're all arguing with each other. And Dream drives off the interstate onto the side road, and one of the guys goes into the woods. I'm not going to tell you why. And he's killed by a werewolf. So instead of driving back to the interstate like normal people would, they keep driving forward into this wilderness that they have no idea where they're at or where this road goes. And they come to a house, and in the house lives this creature who's about 1,000 years old, and he's kind of he can make himself look like whatever he wants, but he has built this whole underground slave empire of pain and torture. And this book was really bad. That's why I'm finding it hard to talk about it, because this book was just really bad. Okay, uh, all the women are sex objects. The dialogue is not very good. The emotions, these characters, this was supposed to be a trip that they're taking about 10 years after they got out of college, somewhere in there. So they're all in, 30, thereabouts. But they act like squabbling teenagers. And they just have absolutely no, I mean, this emotionally, they have absolutely no emotional depth. So when somebody's killed, they just don't care. And even when it's their friend, and there was some interesting world building in this. There's this whole underground labyrinth and city, and it just really didn't make any sense. Um, it kind of read like a video game in places, and honestly, when I got to about page 250, there are 350 pages of this book. I just wanted to quit reading it. I just wanted to put it aside and quit reading it. But it was just so strange that I just kept reading because I wanted to see what happened. And ultimately, I was pretty disappointed. Um, this book gets pretty weird. There's a lot of like BDSM torture, and I don't know. It was just a strange book. It really wasn't my kind of thing, but I just kept reading it. I had to see where it went, and I knew I was going to be disappointed, and I was. And the last book I read was The Ignorant Armies by E.M. Halliday. Halliday? I'm going to call him Halliday. This was really interesting. So, at the very end of the First World War, the British, the Canadians, the French, and the Americans all sent forces to Archangel in northern Russia. And the idea, I believe, was that there were quite a few weapons that they had sent to the Tsarist forces, and they were supposed to be there to guard these weapons from falling into the hands of the Bolsheviks. I was confused about what was going on. And the thing is, the everyone from President Wilson on down to the generals and everyone below them had really no inkling of what they were doing in Russia. It seems like at different levels of authority, everyone had a different idea of what was going on, why they were there, what their goals were, what was and was not authorized. So what started out as this defense of this weapons cache turned into all these battles with the Bolsheviks, and people were just waging wars, and the soldiers really didn't understand why they were there. And after the rest of the fighting had ended in November, they just wanted to go home. They didn't understand why they were there. They didn't understand why they were fighting, and they didn't have enough troops to conquer the Bolsheviks. It was just a really odd. It was just kind of like fighting to fight, and I liked this book though. I was glad to read it because that's a period of time that I know about, but I don't really know anything about it other than that it happened. So there were some really comical events where certain generals and uh, ambassadors and things like that revealed themselves to be incredibly stupid or so idealistic as to have no notion of reality. Um, One that stuck out to me for some reason is that there was I think he was a colonel, and he was a drunk, and he he just drank all day long, every day. And at one point, there were some soldiers walking by, and they thought he was a log, so they sat on him. I just thought that was really funny. But I mean, it was funny. There were funny things going on, but it's not funny because people were dying because of their stupidity. It was just, and I don't know. This was something else. I enjoyed reading this though, and I wish I could tell you more about what happened, but I'm really as confused as those soldiers were about what was going on and why. But it was an interesting look into the the Archangel expedition. So it was okay. It took me quite a while to read it. Um, like I said, I wasn't feeling very good, so my my ability to focus on nonfiction was kind of limited, but I am glad I read it. And this has the wraparound cover too, and so it was it was interesting. So thanks for watching. I hope you'll come back for the next video, and I'll see you next time.